Story 1. When people insist you should put up with abusive parents, especially after you have told them you have no plans to ever speak to them again. I hate the whole honor thy mother and thy father mentality. Half of these people, if not the majority, have not been through it, so it is easy for them to say, but she is your mom or dad. Screw that. Story 2. Talking down to service workers, interrupting constantly, and acting rudely while calling it brutal honesty is unacceptable. Immediate disapproval. Story 3. Someone who has never experienced trauma in their life saying, get over it or move on. If only it were that simple. Story 4. People who genuinely believe blood makes family do not understand. It does not happen often, but they tend to try to convince me to get back in touch with my family when they find out I cut them out of my life. Maybe mind your own business unless you want me to share my trauma to shut you up. Story 5. Disrespect to everyone and everything. There was a man who had money problems, but he wanted to get a pet. The man helping him asked, what if your pet gets sick and you cannot pay for its medication or surgery? The man replied, oh, I'll just have it put down. Seriously, what? Story 6. If someone talks loudly on a cell phone or plays music in an otherwise quiet place, use headphones. Story 7. If they get confrontational over small things, it shows they have a total lack of self-control. I do not necessarily dislike them, but I stay far away from them. Nothing but trouble comes from those people. Story 8. When you are talking to someone and they are not listening but instead just waiting to say what they want to say. Story 9. Throwing someone's trauma or secrets in their face when it suits you and using it against them to either prove a point or manipulate them into doing what you want. Story 10. I do not like it when I feel like I am being talked down to, infantilized, or assumed to be stupid. Act like I am an idiot, and I will hate you. Story 11. People who insist on having opinions about major global issues when they have no critical thinking skills and have done no research. Story 12. Let's see. Rude and entitled people like a Karen, not caring about others, self-centered, lack of common sense, no patience for simple things like waiting in line, controlling, telling you how to dress or speak, who you can and cannot talk to, possessive like having a boyfriend or friend who does not let you talk or hang out with other people, even for work or family gatherings. No basic manners, such as throwing trash on the ground when there is a garbage bin nearby. Liars. Story 13. People who start a discussion, often on political topics but not limited to them, and when you try to rebut their position, cut you off and do not let you make your point. Story 14. Anyone who makes others feel unintelligent for not knowing something or for not knowing what they already know. For example, Einstein maybe try using that intelligence to develop some emotional intelligence. Story 15. Anyone who leaves a subtly condescending comment ending with a teary laughing emoji. I really dislike people who take pleasure in making others emotionally uncomfortable. Story 16. Anyone who claims to be an alpha male or calls someone a beta, I immediately know to dislike them and not take them seriously. Story 17. As someone who has had a stuttering problem since birth, I can still see people finding that funny. I do not hate them. I just wonder what kind of person they are. Story 18. Willful ignorance. I cannot abide someone who is presented with valid, variable information contrary to their beliefs, only to say, so? I still believe in and advocate for this stupid thing. Story 19. People who constantly seek praise for being parents and those who make loving Jesus their entire identity. Story 20. People who spend their workdays talking aimlessly instead of getting work done or passing responsibility to someone else. We see what you are doing. You are not clever. Story 21. Entitled people who do not care about others. I cannot imagine living a life where I am not considerate or helpful to others, even sometimes to the detriment of myself. It blows my mind how selfish some people can be. Story 22. How they treat others. I do not associate with people who are rude to cashiers, waitresses, or anyone else. Story 23. I instinctively dislike anyone who demonstrates hatred toward women, racial prejudice, or hostility toward Jewish people. I dislike people who use profanity in every sentence. Story 24. People who think like this make snap judgments and have fixed negativity. But it is fine, it is just a thought. I will not hold it against you. Story 25. People with no attention span who refuse to actually listen when you are speaking. I am tired of repeating myself to people who are thinking about anything else except the task at hand. Story 26. Hate is a strong word, but the answer will always be litter bugs. If you litter, you are gross. Story 27. Rude to people who work in customer service and people with a temper. I do not want to be around any human being who cannot control their anger. Story 28. Not treating animals with respect is wrong. Even those who hunt regularly still show great compassion towards animals. It costs nothing to be kinder and gentler with animals. Even if you plan on eating them, try to show more respect and compassion. Story 29. When you are made to feel useless by someone, it is the worst feeling ever. There are those who will take your help when needed, and there are those who will never accept your help but will take help from others while showing through their actions how useless you are to them. The closer you are to such a person, the greater the pain and the more you dislike them. It does not even have to be friends. Have you had a close relationship with office colleagues? That is enough. For some, colleagues are enemies while friends are to be cherished. The moment you show them you want to be colleagues, they reveal their true colors. But why can't colleagues be temporary friends, I wonder? In my experience, feeling useful and useless are the best and worst feelings respectively. Story 30. Hate is a very strong word. I try not to hate anyone. However, there are things that can make me dislike a person instantly. Story 31. Political extremists from any side bring up politics in every conversation and on every post, even when it has nothing to do with the subject. Story 32. I would not say hate someone. It is more a feeling of annoyance. I feel that way when somebody talks over me, talks a lot about themselves, and does not listen. Story 33. Anyone rude to retail or food service industry workers is an immediate turnoff and shows a basic lack of respect. Story 34. Two-faced. Do not speak badly about someone and then act like you are friends. That is inappropriate behavior and a waste of everyone's time. Either be genuine or be two-faced elsewhere. Story 35. I speak the truth. No, you are disrespectful and do not know how to be respectful. You can tell the truth without being disrespectful. Story 36. People who criticize those less powerful to feel superior, whether belittling waitstaff or mocking someone's struggles, reveal insecurity. It is especially negative if they try to justify it as simply keeping it real. Story 37. People turn their heads and act like they could never be homeless when they see a homeless person. Story 38. A bragger is someone who acts like they know everything or always tries to outdo you. They may talk behind your back but be nice to your face. This person does not consider how their choices can affect others. Story 39. No empathy for others. I cannot say I hate anyone, but I feel strong disgust and anger when I see someone not caring for the life of a fellow human. Story 40. Hate is a strong word, but I strongly dislike people who think they know everything. You could say, the sky is blue, and they'll respond, well, actually the sky is baby blue according to scientific research. Please just be quiet. Story 41. People who feel compelled to overreact and dramatically exaggerate the most mundane mistakes, mishaps, or actions of others often victimize themselves and demonize those people. Story 42. I agree with everything I've read here so far, but I don't think I saw this mentioned, so I'll add it. Being rude or mean to someone who is trying to learn how to do something is unhelpful. They obviously don't know how to do it yet, so being harsh to them over it does no good. Where I work, we had one supervisor who was very harsh to brand new workers from day one. They literally just got hired and have never done this before, so give them a moment. She made many of them cry. The kicker is I worked there already when she was newly hired before moving up to supervisor, and she didn't know much about how to do anything either. People quickly forget that they were in those shoes themselves at one point. Have a little patience. Story 43. For me to hate someone, it requires a pretty high bar. It is pretty much reserved for anyone who physically or sexually abuses children. I strongly dislike people who are willfully ignorant and openly hostile about it, as well as people who refuse to take accountability for their mistakes or wrongdoing. I can forgive many things except what I mentioned above, if the person makes a good faith effort to reflect on their actions and own up to them. People who choose to double down or gaslight others into thinking they did nothing wrong are scumbags. Story 44. When people say, "Stop making being gay or transgender your entire personality," it always comes from ignorant bigots who make football, religion, and politics their entire personality. Story 45. I don't really hate anyone, but there are a few traits that are major turnoffs for me. Arrogance, believing your way is the only right way, and treating others like they are idiots for thinking differently is a big no. Snobbiness, looking down on people, is never a good look, no matter how above it you think you are. Cheating, whether it is in relationships, school, or trying to game the system, if you are willing to cheat, that tells me everything I need to know. These are just some personal dislikes I cannot ignore. Story 46. Being rude to strangers, waiters, shopkeepers, or others, such as not saying thank you, is unpleasant. Not holding the door for people coming after you, being obnoxiously loud, or showing even the slightest hint of racism or classism is unacceptable. Story 47. 1. Leaving your shopping cart in the middle of the parking lot. People who comment on your weight and tell you to eat a cheeseburger. Performative activists or people who are socially conscious for appearance only. Story 48. People who brag about doing terrible things to others and act as if it is something to be proud of. Story 49. Not being able to admit they do not know enough about something to confidently speak about it. Refusal to listen to differences of opinion or ignoring blatantly clear facts. Any form of prejudice or closed-minded judgment. Using religion as a justification or solution to anything and everything. Caillou, his family, and enablers of his behavior. Story 50. Make America Great Again supporters have life-size cutouts, Donald Trump flags, and other signs all over their yard. Yes, I am referring to my neighbors down the block. Story 51. Dishonest and entitled individuals expect everyone to follow them in whatever they want to do with people and believe that the world revolves around them. Story 52. When you are waiting in line for a long time and someone who just arrived sees a familiar face in front of you, they and their family jump in to have a full-length awkward conversation, hoping that nobody notices them pushing in. Story 53. Making jokes at the expense of someone else, especially jokes about minorities, it deeply pisses me off. Story 54. Hate is a very strong word. Could we all just tone things down a bit? There are indeed people I do not like, but I cannot say I hate them. I suppose someone who physically hurts people intentionally is truly despicable. Story 55. The more they try to hide their guilt, the more obvious it becomes that they are guilty. I do not hate them necessarily, but trust is gone forever. Story 56. The men who believe they deserve respect simply because they are men. Calm down, little guy. Nobody has respect for someone who is so hot-headed that they burn all their bridges and still believe they have never done anything wrong in their life. I feel like such a coward, but I cannot help but laugh in their faces sometimes. Story 57. One thing that instantly makes it hard for me to trust or even be around someone is dishonesty. It is not just about lying, but also the feeling of being manipulated or misled. Story 58. Hate is a very strong word. I suppose I hate war criminals. If we are talking about somewhat everyday things, I would say my anger is reserved for those who push pseudoscientific treatments on others who suffer from serious medical issues. Story 59. Arrogance. Confidence is one thing, but people who are really focused on their appearance and become self-absorbed, I dislike it. Just the main character attitude overall. Story 60. The lack of basic decency towards strangers, waiters, and elderly people is concerning. You do not have to smile, and I do not either, but you should not be rude to someone who is asking for directions. Story 61. Claiming my work as their own. Or, almost as bad is the phrase, "we collaborated." I worked while you scrolled on social media. Story 62. Parking in the middle of the street when there is a perfectly large available spot directly to the right of them. Just because you put your hazard lights on does not mean it is okay to block the road because you are too lazy. I am in the United States, so in other countries this would be the left. Story 63. People who use their mental health or trauma as an excuse for poor behavior or hurting others, or as a way to get attention, sympathy, or to avoid working or improving themselves or their situation, are using those experiences improperly. These are reasons for certain challenges, yes, 100%. They are not excuses. We can all do better, even with our own individual limitations. Some things will be harder and some may be impossible, but not everything. Story 64. People who intentionally twist other people's goodwill and effort to help as malice just because they did not get the results they wanted. For example, my boss contacted me while I was at my grandfather's funeral to do some photo editing. I did it on my phone since we were still in the car, only for him to start hurling insults and criticizing my artistic skills because I made a few mistakes. Or the time he started making physical threats because I asked for another photo of his friend to use on the ID he wanted me to print. Story 65. The few times I have encountered people with either Monster Energy decals on their truck, it is always a truck, or a Monster Energy tattoo, they are always absolutely insufferable. Instant judgment when I see either. Story 66. Constantly on their phones, non-stop, like Jesus. Allow your brain to relax sometimes and enjoy the company you are with, or just enjoy silence. Story 67. I tend not to hate people, but I strongly dislike those who interrupt, turn every conversation to themselves, and do not really listen to others. I have no desire to be around such people. Story 68. People who see themselves as victims while they harm everyone around them. You also see boyfriends who have beaten their girlfriends to death. In police interviews, they still think they are the victims. Story 69. Being rude to minimum wage workers who are actually trying their best and not putting shopping carts back even though they are right there. Story 70. Their face. Sorry, but some people's faces just annoy me. I am sure they feel the same exact way about mine too. Story 71. I try really hard not to hate anyone because it takes a lot of energy to dislike someone. What turns me off are people who make politics their entire personality even though they are not intelligent enough to carry a thoughtful conversation. People who hate others purely based on their religion but are giant hypocrites also bother me. Additionally, people who seek attention annoy me greatly. Story 72. When someone constantly needs to one-up every experience you share. You tell a story about a rough week. Theirs was worse. You are excited about something. They have already done it and say it is not that great. It is exhausting, invalidating, and strangely competitive for no reason. Story 73. Somebody whose entire personality is politics and who talks about nothing else, making all their life decisions based on being around people with the same political views. Story 74. One-upping others. Like, I broke my leg in a car accident, followed by them saying, I can do one better, or that's nothing. When I've spent hours cooking, only for someone to say, my someone's name, makes this better. It makes me want to pick up their plate and throw it in the garbage while telling them to have that person make it for them. Also, putting spices or other ingredients into their food without tasting it first. Backstabbing and lying. Story 75. You cannot open your mouth or write 2 sentences before they make a political remark. Both sides have their followers. No, my baby's third eye is not Joe Biden's or Donald Trump's fault. Story 76. I don't know how to phrase this properly, but when people say their family was poor as a child, yet their parents are highly successful, such as lawyers or doctors, it seems like they want to pretend to struggle because they have nothing else interesting to share. Story 77. People who are immediately dismissive of others because they feel superior or like main characters. Also, anyone abusive to animals will see my fighting side very quickly. Story 78. Playing music loudly on their phone in public. Conducting a loud phone call on speakerphone in public. Also, littering. Story 79. People who hate things that are extremely mild inconveniences. I am not talking about people who hate chargers that barely work unless at an angle. I am talking about people who feel the need to mention how much they hate cats, children in public spaces, picky eaters, the homeless, pop music, people into astrology, small dogs, people from other places. Not necessarily xenophobia, though I dislike that too. More so just people who hate others from the next town over, valley girls, and fans of opposing sports teams. We get it, you cannot stand people who like things. It is important to clarify that it is not people with casual disliking of any of these things, but people who claim to hate them. It is okay to dislike things even if you have no moral right to, because everyone is their own person. There is a huge difference between someone who just does not like cats and someone who will rant and go on about how bad pets cats are, how much better dogs are, and how cats are the spawn of the devil. It is just so annoying. Story 80. Baseball caps, ear gauges, and pine-scented perfume. Also, poor hygiene. Wash your hair, people. And people who think they are parents because they have pets. Story 81. When someone we trust and respect turns their back on us and speaks badly about us just to make themselves look perfect. Story 82. When they say, it's all part of God's plan, or something similar when something bad happens, stop trying to force your religion on me, especially while I am grieving. How can anyone go up to a person whose life just fell apart and tell them that it is all part of some divine plan? If that plan wants me to suffer, then no thanks, I do not care for the plan. Story 83. People who share someone else's personal business, especially in a mocking way. Not everyone is great at knowing who to trust. When I hear someone spreading someone else's business that was shared out of trust, it tells me everything I need to know about who they are. Story 84. When I tell people I am always beyond tired and exhausted all the time because of my multiple sclerosis-related fatigue, they respond with either, "Oh, I am tired too. Maybe I should get checked for multiple sclerosis as well." Or, "Well, everyone is a bit tired here and there." Story 85. People who are unpleasant under the guise of honesty. Also, people who laugh about their own negative attitude and misbehavior instead of striving to be better individuals. Being aware of your flaws does not excuse continuing harmful behavior. Story 86. People who are rude to waitstaff and cashiers for no reason. People who say, "Man up, be a man," or "boys will be boys." People who do not put their shopping carts where they belong. People who try to convert me to their religion. And people who give their child a phone or a tablet every time they act up instead of addressing the behavior. Story 87. If someone says something negative about Black people, sometimes I test them to see how they will react. Story 88. I was once in a car with an acquaintance, about whom I already had mixed feelings. This person took his finished McDonald's meal and casually tossed it out the car window. I immediately disliked him after that. I am not even sure why. It is obviously trashy and inconsiderate, but the intensity and speed of my dislike surprised me. Story 89. Dramatic people make everything a huge deal. It is always about them, and they always see themselves as victims of some kind of persecution. Story 90. Entitlement. I absolutely hate it when people I don't know treat me like I owe them something. I was waiting to cross the street the other day, and just as the light was about to change to let me cross, some man rolled into the crosswalk, rolled down his window, and asked where he could buy coffee and donuts. When I say he rolled into the crosswalk, I don't mean he let his bumper cross the white line. I mean it was impossible to cross the street in the crosswalk because his vehicle was completely blocking it. I honestly drew a blank. I haven't bought a donut in over 5 years, and I don't buy coffee at places that also sell donuts. If I had a little longer to think about it, I could have pointed him towards a place a few blocks away, but all I could think of was, I'm going to lose this light because this guy just blocked the crosswalk. So I said, "I'm not from around here. Back up. You're blocking the crosswalk." He backed up. I barely made my light, and I thought the whole situation was over until he started shouting from his window, "Go away. I was just asking for directions." In his mind, it's okay to block me from getting where I'm trying to go with his vehicle so he can ask for directions. And when I indicate I don't have any directions to give him, he throws a tantrum. He thought he was entitled to something. When he didn't get what he thought he was entitled to, he had a tantrum. If you don't even know my name, don't assume I owe you anything. Story 91. Compulsive liars are the type of people who lie about small, irrelevant things. Keep those people away from me. I find them very strange. Story 92. poor music taste. 3,000 hours of continuous rap caviar or today's top hits is not a Spotify Wrapped. It is very disappointing. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.